From deep in the heart of Central Texas, it's the Best of the Outdoors podcast, brought to you by Texas Fishing Game Magazine, the voice of the Texas outdoor nation. I'm your humble host, Dustin Von Warnke, the outdoor success guy, back with you with another podcast, and man, am I excited to be back again in front of this microphone, speaking the truth, talking about all things outdoors and Texas and beyond, and I just love this show and love to have the opportunity to share this with you. So we are beginning hunting season, both seasons starting right around the corner here in late September, early October. For Texas here, it starts September the 29th, and I'm really excited about that. And the crazy thing that I wanted to cover on this podcast is not so much, you know, the catching and the killing and all the stuff that we talk about, the tactical and practical stuff that we talk about on the show, but I wanted to talk about, you know, some introspective stuff, why we hunt and fish, why we do outdoor stuff. And I'm bringing a guest on this show I wanted to have on for the last 2 years, I think, since I first was introduced to him by Blake Marshall, who's been on the show before. Blake owns King of 8 Outfitters in Ballinger, Texas, and is a fantastic guy. And basically, I've really enjoyed, having Blake on the podcast, but Blake introduced me to Zach Byrd, and Zach Byrd has a YouTube channel called the Zach Byrd Adventure Hour, and basically he has a channel that's about metal detecting and old Civil War finds and things like that he finds in his journeys in the outdoors. And he does a little bit of hunting short films, which is what really attracted me to him. And then he has just a wide variety of other content on his YouTube channel. So I'm definitely going to put the YouTube channel in the show notes if you want to check it out. But Zach Byrd really has a heart for conservation and nature, and the reason, the sole reason that we hunt and fish, that we get in the outdoors. And this is kind of a hunting podcast because the content's around hunting, but this covers fishing too. So don't tune out if you just fish, or if you just hunt, or if you do both. I think this is going to be an educational thing for all of us, and just an introspective thing, something that we can kind of look within before we get started with hunting season, and the guns and the bows get broken out and start really going after it. I really think you'll like this. So what attracted me first to Zach was the Falling of the Veil. And this is about a 5 to 6 minute clip that I'm going to play that basically talks about the wildlife. It's a short film that he has on YouTube. I'll put the link to that as well. And then I'll end this show with The Call of Fall, which is another short film that he did. Both audio, obviously, because this is a podcast and I don't have the ability to show video, but you can check out these videos in the show notes. They're on YouTube. They're readily available anywhere on your phone or whatever. So that all being said, here is The Falling of the Veil, which is a short film by Zach Byrd, and then at the end I'll play The Call of Fall in between our interview we'll have in the middle, and hope you enjoy it. Thanks so much for listening. Here we go.
The Falling of the Veil. I was 24 when I realized the wild was dying. The epiphany came to me while deer hunting one October evening. Such epiphanies rarely seize a man of the morning time, I've found. There's a frailty to morning light. It softens the hard edges of the world where the dew of night makes camp. Its angle radiates a white hue and illuminates the unnamed particles of vagabondage, the dregs of dreams, the frayed edges of night, both waltzing a final waltz. It glows like a lover's breath that curls along each beam like baby hair. During such moments, a poet can only sing. October is spring within the fall here in Georgia. A deciduous cacophony sweeps the hollows, the vibrant yellows of mountain ash and bitternut hickory and black walnut harmonize in splendor with the subtle bronze shield of the American beech and sweet birch. Fiery clashes from the northern red oak and American sycamore erupt and seem to disperse red flickering embers of the red maple, black cherry, and flowering dogwood. But evening light lands differently upon a man's heart. The harsh angle does not bring with it a new day, Instead, it rides on a thin veil of dusk, and as this veil drifts over the cacophony, the former colors begin to smear with one another in static noise. As night impedes, the observer is left looking at a muddy and mysterious scene, drained of its vibrancy. The wind through it whispers but two words: brevity and goodbye. It was during one of these October evenings that I heard a similar whisper in my heart. The words formed and lingered like a hybrid of mist and smog, a clumsy juxtaposition composed of forest noise and the hum of distant highway traffic. From my tree near the mountaintop, far away, I could see the pulse of the city. Brake lights flickered between invisible tree branches. Occasional horn honks shot outward into the forest like futuristic arrows. Faintly, when the wind blew just right, I could make out the golden arches of the burger joint below. As night arrived, I began gathering my equipment. I felt a weight inside me I'd not felt before. It was not tied to knowing I'd soon assume my position within the red pulse of civilization. No, I'd already come to terms with that epiphany at a younger age. This was different, subdued, like the impossible ideas that transcend the minds of children and twist them into adults, or the gray and gritty smear between erosion lines. As I made my descent, and the city was swallowed by the mountainside, I looked out across the drained lowlands of the Etowah River Valley, and saw great running, ghostly gray squares in the night look barren and alien, even from space. As I pulled my truck out onto the road, as my eyes squinted into the headlights of oncoming cars, I realized that these are the evening days of wildness. Although the deer still fear our silhouette and our scent, and the squirrel continue to bark at the cadence of our footfalls over dry leaves, I know in my heart that these creatures are static noise. They are echoes of a day when wildness could not be tamed. And they are caught just as I am caught, somewhere in a dusky hue where history and the present moment tear apart and become strangers to one another. I still go to the woods. The wildest spot I find there is often in my mind, when I'm able to imagine the fleeting vision of how it all was before it all was not. Sometimes it's a Cherokee in my periphery, kneeling near a log, his turkey feathers quietly shaking as he draws his bow. Other times it's along the long lashes of a mother doe, as her fawn nurses the last few drops from her before the leaves begin to change. I haven't stopped killing deer, but I don't take as many as I once did. Nowadays, I like being near deer more than anything. I think it's because we share a common awareness. For one of us, it's conscious. For the other, a raw flame of instinct. But for each of us, it acts as a compass needle. It keeps us alive. It tells us when to run, when to stop. It tells us when to eat, when to rest. The needle of the doe sends her away from me. My needle sends me after her. Sometimes it's to kill, but most times it's only to witness a brief, muddy glimpse before the falling of the veil.
Joining me on the phone, Mr. Zach Byrd from Zach Byrd's Adventure Hour. And I'm saying your name right, Zach?
Yeah, it's Zach Byrd.
Zach Byrd, okay, Adventure Hour on YouTube. And your slogan, I guess, is adventure is where you find it. What brought me initially to you, Zach, was Blake Marshall, who's a mutual friend. And it's called The Falling of the Veil. And it's one of the most... It gives me chills when I listen to it. And not very much stuff gives me chills. just the way you mix poetry, the way you mix short film, the way you mix hunting, all with kind of how you got started doing all this stuff on YouTube.
Well, that's a pretty loaded question.
I'm sorry.
Guess you could say. I mean, that's how my mind works. Like, well, I guess I could start with when I was in high school. I had a desire to become a literature teacher, and I guess I just didn't really. It was about 2 years into college that I realized that probably wasn't the best avenue, because that would require me to be sitting at a desk for way too many hours.
Right.
And teaching adolescents 80% who were probably disinterested in what I was teaching them.
Yep.
And I would rather be in the woods. I would rather be out like adventuring. I would rather be out hunting. I would rather be out fishing, trapping. So I gave up on that dream, but that artistic flair that I had, that love for language, it still lingered, and I kind of found myself sitting in the deer stand just writing.
Yeah.
And I fell in love with Christopher Camuto. He's written he's written a book about fly fishing in the Blue Ridge Mountains. He's written a beautiful work of nonfiction regarding the red wolf in what's the park in Tennessee, Cades Cove.
Yeah, I know what
the
you're talking
reintroduction.
Yeah.
And so yeah, I've kind of found myself in this precarious place where, like, I love poetry, I love the written word, but I'm also a deer hunter, and those two things have a habit of repelling each other.
Yes.
If you know what I mean.
I do.
And I don't mean that in a negative sense. I'm not saying anything about deer hunters. If anything, I'm saying something about how the public perceives deer hunters.
Yes, that's where I was going to go. A bunch of toothless rednecks, as a lot of people think we are. We're really,
exactly.
And we're not sophisticated, and we don't, care about nature and all that. I mean, and some of the most sophisticated people I've met are hunters. I mean,
some of the smartest people I've ever met are deer hunters.
Yeah, that's good. So, go ahead.
I'm not good at like you if I get to rambling, just stop me.
It's fine.
But if you hear me go quiet, that means I'm like a dog sitting for a treat. I need another question.
You need another question? Okay, that's
Yeah.
cool. That's good to know. No, that's good. And I mean, the thing that the reason I wanted to have you on is just I like deep thoughts when it comes to when I sit in the woods, when I'm by myself. And, of course, I've got my iPhone and my headphones and stuff, and I listen to podcasts, listen to music and that kind of stuff. But there are certain times where it's the silence in between the space that is the most beautiful music you can listen to. Does that make sense to you, Zach?
Yeah, of course it does.
And it's just one of those things that, it really resonates with me, is that's my communion with nature, or my communion with God, or whatever your belief system is. And if you watch me on YouTube, or on a Facebook, guys, I do a lot of these motivational videos and stuff that I've been kicking out a bunch lately on Facebook, not Facebook Live, but just Facebook video. And I mean, it's just me, basically it's just kind of like the notes between the notes and music are where the magic is made. The silence is where the magic is made. And that's one thing that's always called me about nature.
Yeah, well, I think that's why some of my best writing comes on the deer stand.
Right.
Because it's a transition. It's a transition between summer and winter. The fall is, there are beautiful things happening in those deer woods. There are things happening in the deer woods that I've seen things on stand that I just after it's over, I just turn around and I just want to like grab somebody by their shoulders and say, "Did you see that?
Right.
Did you witness that?" But there's never anyone there,
Yeah.
because it's like there's an entirely different world that's existing out there beyond the pavement,
Right.
beyond the cul-de-sac.
Yeah.
that will fill any person with this just sense of awe,
Right.
you know? And there's so much to be said about just how domesticated the human being as a species has become.
That's a good point. Nobody's really brought that up on the show before, and that's a really good point.
Yeah, and I mean, I make these. I have no political agenda. I have no philosophical agenda. I have no agenda whatsoever. When I make my deer hunting videos on YouTube, I make them purely from like, and if there's anybody listening tonight that has a calling, if you want to call it a calling, I don't really like to call it a calling, but if there's anybody listening tonight that writes, they'll understand what I'm saying here.
Yeah.
Like, no, I really don't feel that any writer decides when they write.
Right. I agree, and I've written quite a bit.
Well, you probably understand what I'm saying.
I do. That's why that resonates so well with me, because I've written books and ebooks, and I've written. I authored some essays back in college, and poetry and stuff that I did back in college, and published in paperback. And then I've written 7 ebooks for the outdoor industry. And I mean, the thing with all of that is that it just hits you, and you have to get it out of you. Do you recognize that too?
Exactly. Like, the image that always comes to my mind when I know it's time to write, I imagine a cat. I imagine like a playful kitten, not a cat, but a kitten. And just imagine some twine up on the counter. Maybe somebody set it on the counter, and there's a little dangle hanging off, and the cat's trying to get it. But finally, it hooks it.
Yeah.
It hooks it, and it's like whatever. So something happens for the writer, and we're able, and maybe it's not. Maybe it's a subconscious hooking, but something happens. Maybe it's just a series of events in a given day that places you in a certain mind state.
Right.
But you're able to hook that twine, and then everything just comes unraveling on top of you, and you don't really know what to do with it. But a good writer is able to do something with it.
Yeah. No, that's good. And I mean, not everybody listens to the show as a writer. I mean, obviously we're Texas Outdoor Nation, and we're Texas Fish and Game, and we have a lot of people that listen outside of the state too. But I mean, the thing that's really interesting about this podcast is I like to go deep into stuff, and it goes back to conservation, which is something that Chester Moore, I've had on the show a million times. He's our editor-in-chief, Zach, and he basically, it brings up this Rick Warren quote, which is kind of a Christian quote, but it says, "The purpose of influence is helping those who have none." And in a way, in an action, proactive state or whatever, we're the voice as hunters for the wildlife, aren't we? I mean, we're the voice that they don't have without us as hunters. Yes.
Well, absolutely. I mean, that echoes Aldo Leopold all day long.
Yeah.
I mean,
and I'm not a big reader of Aldo Leopold, but I know what you're talking about.
Yeah. No, that's fine. That's fine. I mean, there's a lot of books out there. There's a lot. I mean, I'm not sure if there's anything that's been written about more, well, at least from my perspective, than nature. And I mean, even deer hunting, like every time I feel like I have an original thought, like there's probably somebody else who has already penned that thought. Maybe not in the exact words, but they've captured the essence of what I'm trying to convey. And, but I think that's a brilliant point that you brought up. And I think that we as outdoorsmen, people that love nature and that, have like an unquenchable thirst to see these wild places remain wild, and to not see cities encroaching upon cities because if we continue at the rate that we're going, I mean, there's going to be a sidewalk stretching from New York to California.
Right. You're not lying about that. You're right.
And I say that, and then this is going to be weird, I say that as a libertarian, and I think that that's why Aldo Leopold resonates so strongly within me, because a libertarian philosophy says that, like, the free market is the answer. The free market is the answer, but that's when the poetic, the deer hunter in me rises up,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm like, okay, well, the free market is saying that we need 72,000 McDonald's between Georgia and Mississippi, and the deer hunter, the poet in me says, no, we don't. And we got to find we have to find common ground between there, and
Right.
we have to wake up we need to shake the core of the people that we already have on our team, the deer hunters that we already have on our team. We have to shake them, and we have to let them know, hey, listen, like the way that society is evolving, there's already in my lifetime, like I used to could be able to hunt so many different properties, and every year I lose a property.
Yeah.
Every year it's
I know the
harder to get
feeling. I've
property.
been there too. In Texas, it's mainly private land, but I've lost a lot of private land because of landscape development, over the years. My
Exactly.
urban property and stuff like that I bow hunted on and that kind of stuff that are neighborhoods, backs to neighborhoods and stuff I've lost because, new neighbors and they don't want hunting, and I mean, that's kind of this thing in the blues, and that's why a lot of guys and a few guys listen to this podcast hunt public land, and you guys know who you are, and that's a reason a lot of times they say they hunt because, hunt public because they know that their chances are better than knocking on doors and or buying a lease because it's cost
Exactly. And I
prohibitive.
think exactly. And I think that we're just kind of like on the macro, I mean, the deer hunters know firsthand before anybody else in North America. They know, hey, the habitat's depleting.
Yes, landscape
The
development.
habitat's depleting.
Yep.
Like the hunters are the pulse.
Right.
They're the pulse of the wildlife. Like the hunters are what give wildlife value.
No, it's true, and it's that way. I've talked about this in the show ad nauseum, but it's that way in Africa. If there was not hunting, sport hunting in Africa, there'd be no value on those animals' lives, and those animals would not exist anymore. You agree
Yeah,
with
Jesus
that?
Christ, don't get me started on Africa.
Yeah, but I mean, I've had a few guests that have hunted Africa in the past, and I mean, I try to at least keep it kind of fast and loose because it is so true that landscape development is the first thing I learned when I was at Hunter's Ed in 2004 was landscape development is a number one factor that is encroaching on our hunting rights.
Yeah, that's
And
absolutely.
on wildlife depletion and that kind of stuff. I shouldn't say hunting rights, but I mean wildlife depletion as far as wildlife habitat loss and stuff is landscape development, which is everywhere is booming right now.
Yeah, yeah, and I just think that I mean anybody who has grown up in a metro town like I grew up in Bartow County, Georgia. Anybody wants to look it up? When I was 13, me and my dad we had access to all kinds of properties. It was not hard to go and knock on somebody's door, and they would tell us, yeah, they're eating all our vegetables. Go
Right.
ahead.
Go ahead and
You know,
go
but-
get them. Yeah.
But those fields and those properties have been replaced by subdivisions, and I don't mean this in a demeaning way, but when a county starts kind of rising as far as like when the land value goes up and whenever it seems like a suitable place for
Yes.
someone to live in reference to airports and commutes.
Sure.
It brings in a different type of person, a person that was not grown up, that they did not grow up around deer hunting. They didn't grow up or just. Let me put it this way: they were never told to go out into the backyard and to wring a chicken's neck and to
Right.
bring it in.
Right. The country style. Yeah. The old school lifestyle. Yeah. I'm with you.
Exactly. And when those people come into this type of community and you knock on their door and you're like, hey, do you care if I deer hunt? They're going to be like, I feed those deer. Those
Yeah.
deer are my pets.
Those deer are my pets. And my in-laws live in a neighborhood like that. Very large acreage, not large acres, but it's 1 to 5 acre lots, and it's a perfect place for crossbow hunting if you want to know the truth. And the
Yeah.
reason why I can't do it is because other people feed the deer, and there are other neighbors that don't want you on their land. And I mean, but I cut my teeth back in 2009 when I got a connection through a family member to a piece of land where I killed dozens of deer over the maybe 8 years. Shot my biggest archery buck off of that piece of land. It was behind a neighborhood, that runs across a creek. Urban bow hunting, But then new neighbors moved in, and this house sold and whatever, and I didn't feel welcome there anymore.
Yeah, it happens, man.
So I feel you, and that's the thing that I like to talk about, and the issues that we face as hunters is one of the things that we can do to educate other people is unite our own front, and that's one thing I don't think that we're doing very well, because bow hunters versus crossbow hunters and gun hunters versus archery, I do it all. I love it all. But can't we all get along? That's what I've been saying on this show for years. I mean, why can't we unite and have some things in common and fight the good fight together?
Well, that kind of puts me in another situation as a libertarian, because as a libertarian, I fundamentally despise collectivism.
Okay.
And collectivism is something where just it's like team spirit, because to reference Thoreau, I believe in the individual. I believe in the individual spirit.
Okay.
But if there's ever been a time to embrace collectivism, it's in the outdoor community.
Yeah.
We have to support one another. Do I like who's the rock star? Come on.
Ted Nugent?
Ted Nugent.
He writes
Ted
for our
Nugent,
magazine, dude. I mean,
Yeah.
so be careful.
I'm not. Hey,
I'm just messing.
hey, man.
He doesn't
You can holler at my subscribers on YouTube. They know that I will call a spade a spade. And I'm not saying that I dislike the man. I'm not saying that I don't agree with the man. I'm just saying that. Do what?
Keep going with your thought. You're good.
Okay. I think that Ted Nugent has probably brought more people into the hunting community than he's pushed away. But I feel like he's pushed away people that could have been brought to the hunting community. And that right there is the crux. And that's what I want people to hear, because he comes across to somebody that grew up in Sacramento as fringe. He comes across as fringe.
Oh, sure.
He does.
Well, he does,
and like we're not trying to bag the stocked trout. We're trying to catch those native trout.
Yeah.
And if somebody wants to argue that point with me, then I'll have a conversation with them. But that is something that really needs to be discussed, because we really need to evaluate how we portray deer hunting and harvesting organic meat from the wild. It should, like, hunting should be viewed as eloquently as going out and harvesting mushrooms.
Yes.
As far as how we evolved, we're hunter-gatherers.
Right. Like,
meat should not be alienated from mushroom hunting or going out and picking blackberries. It's the same thing. It's in our genes. It's in our DNA. It's primal.
Yeah.
And when anybody that portrays it in a way that puts people off, like, don't let your ego go. Right. Let your ego go. Don't let your ego get in the way, because your ego is something that came later. That's something that came later. After we were hunters and gatherers.
Right.
Like.
Yep. No, I'm with you.
I digress here. I don't want to go too deep into that.
No, we're not.
I'm just saying I like him, but I'm just saying, like, I can see how he could be perceived from like some kid that grew up in New York that could be reachable, but then he turns on Fox News and sees this dude debating Piers Morgan, and he comes across as just, he's like, no way. And then he turns that button off forever.
Yeah.
Forever.
He's not going back. Yeah. That's a good point. And that all being said, my whole thing is, and I'm a libertarian too. I hardly ever talk about politics on the show.
That's awesome, man. That's awesome.
I really am. And I've been a libertarian for probably 12 years now. And the reason why I am is because I believe in, the power of free will, the power of free market, and all that other stuff. But it's good to find somebody that's like-minded about that, about politics stuff. But I'm all about furthering the agenda of the hunting, the hunting tradition down the road. And that's something that I've been about with this show for a while, is just educating people on talking to the right people and getting kids in the outdoors, which sometimes, a lot of people, I tout that point all the time, Zach, on this show about getting your kids in the outdoors. But a lot of times if it's a kid of a neighbor's, kid, a friend of a neighbor's, heck, sometimes throw them in the truck and bring them, make sure it's okay with their parents and take them hunting. I mean, if they have no other exposure to it, that may be the only exposure they get.
I remember back in high school, cause I grew up deer hunting. My earliest memory, one of my earliest memories was just sitting on a homemade wooden stand. Nothing to prop my feet up on. I'm just sitting beneath my dad, pretty much on a 2x4. My feet are numb, and a deer walks out. My dad kills it. Well, that was when I was about 6 or 7, and fast forward 5 or 6 years, I'm in middle school and I'm talking to my friends about hunting. Fast forward 2 or 3 more years, I'm in high school, and all I want to do is to introduce as many people to what I have experienced out there in the woods as I can. And I've been doing that ever since I can remember, ever since I was able to.
That's awesome.
It really happened once I got my license. I was like, okay, well, I have my license now.
Yeah.
Who do I think that I can turn on to this? Who do I feel is susceptible to getting this bug, this virus that is something that we've forgotten along the way? Who can I and honestly, I have gotten so many people into deer hunting, and it's something that we as hunters don't talk about enough. It's something in us.
The advocate.
It's not something. Yeah, exactly. It's not something new that you're introducing into their body. It's something you just have to breathe life into. It's already there. They have an ember deep down in them.
I didn't even think about that. That's good. Yeah, I like that. The ember's already there. You just got to stoke the fire.
Yeah, you just got to breathe a little life into it, man.
I didn't even think about that. That's great, Zach.
I mean, that's what it is, though. I mean, you show me you take, and I say this as somebody that's never experienced this, but I've watched some very captivating videos. If you were to take somebody and put them in Colorado during the bull elk season, the full-fledged rut, they're gonna want to shoot something.
Mm-hmm. It's primal.
It's in us. It's in us, and that. And the fact that it is in us, and the fact that even somebody like me, somebody like you can forget that it's in us, tells you how far we've walked off the path.
No,
and that's the messaging. That's the message that we have to try to rephrase. That's the messaging that we really need to consider when we put our things out there. And by things, I mean our posts on social media. It's so tempting sometimes to be like, screw vegans, this is this, I killed this deer, I did this broadhead, tore it up. No, stop all that, because you're turning future hunters off.
Yeah,
I'm just saying, foragers aren't I just walked up to this mushroom and I cut its stalk and I cut its stem and I just shoved it in my bag. It's riding on the tailgate home. No, that's not how you have to do it.
I got it strapped to the hood. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
exactly.
I got this portobello on the hood.
That's right.
You can't do.
No, you can't.
That. And honestly, I think that most hunters, if they shoot a deer and even quick kills, 30 seconds, the deer falls down, it kicks its legs. 99% of hunters see that deer kicking its leg, see that deer trying to get another breath, and they feel the deepest sorrow.
Right.
The deepest sorrow. And that's something that I feel that needs to be conveyed more.
Yeah.
We're not bloodthirsty, knuckle dragging heathens.
We are.
we're doing what we are drawn to do, which is to render protein and nutrients from our environment. And we cannot be sustained by plants alone.
Right.
We can't. I mean, how many vegans have gone on a vegan diet to have their body break down?
Yeah. So there's not enough protein, or not enough meat.
Yeah.
I'm with you.
Not enough cholesterol.
Yeah.
Protein. I mean, and then they go back on meat and they're like, oh, well, that wasn't good for me.
Right.
That wasn't good for me. I have incisors. I have canines.
Right.
For a reason. You know?
Well, and it's like you said, and you know, it just goes back to the falling of the veil. You know, some of the words you use in that short film. You know, you feel like the wild is dying. I mean, we feel like you were 24 when you felt. You remember that part, right? You were 24 when you felt the wild was dying. What do you mean by that?
Well, I meant that for a long time, I felt like. Well, I think that there's a sense of naivety that comes with any 24-year-old, you know?
Sure.
I remember parking on the edge of it wasn't a main highway, but it was a road leading to a main highway. And it was a hunting permission that I had. It was 800 acres, and it felt, I'd been hunting it for 5 years, and it felt like the wilderness, you know?
Yeah.
And for the first 4 years that I hunted it, I would trek back a good long ways away from roads, and I felt like I was in the woods. Well, there came an evening when the foliage was gone, and I was sitting up there, and I don't know about you, but I'm always the type, I sit in my stand way too long. Everybody's always waiting on me at the trail, like, where is he at? And I'm just convincing myself, like, if a deer walks out.
Yeah.
I can. I'll be able to see it. I'll be able to see it.
I'm the same way, dude. Don't worry.
I'll pull my bow back, and I'm like, I can't see nothing. But anyways, I was sitting there, and something came over me, and I was nearly on the peak of a mountain, and I looked down, and I could see brake lights. I could see the golden arches of McDonald's signs, and I was like, I had this like sad feeling come over me. I was like, my entire life, I felt like I was venturing into the wild. I felt like I was getting away from society, but like there's no getting away from it. Like, this is what we are. This is what we do. We conquer, we destroy. And then I started imagining, like, well, how long is it until this 800 acres becomes 400 acres? Yeah. And how long before exactly? And that led me on this depressing, this depressing mind state where I was just like, well, what are we doing here? Like, yeah. well, what are we doing here as a species? Because I don't see wildness surviving this. Yeah. And then I started viewing humans, and I don't mean, and trust me, I've already said I'm a libertarian. I'm not a Democrat. And I'm team human all the way. I want us to survive before I want deer to survive.
You're in good hands here. We all love you.
Okay, if that means escaping Earth and becoming multiplanetary, right. Sure, that's fine. I will hunt animals there. But what I'm saying is, like, what is the ultimate goal? And I'm sure that you have some people that are contractors out there, and they're meeting the needs of people that are currently needing needs. But I think that we're at this precarious state in our species where we need to take a step back, we need to take a deep breath, and we need to reevaluate what we're doing to this earth. We need to really, reevaluate what means something to us.
No, that's a good point.
Because, go ahead.
No, you go ahead, buddy.
Because Otto Leopold, he saw the importance of having wild spaces. We have Yellowstone and countless other national parks and public lands. He was the forefather of the public land movement. And if it wasn't for him, I don't even know what the public land movement would be.
Yeah.
And And he was inspired by Thoreau. And if there's any listeners out there who are deer hunters, like I strongly suggest go out and read Otto Leopold's Sand County Almanac and read Thoreau's Civil Disobedience and Walden. Read those books. Well, like you owe it to yourself and you owe it to your fellow hunters to read those books, because they will fill you with an understanding, a desire to preserve these places. Right. Like I mean, even if it means a community coming together, throwing money in a pot and buying a section of land and just saying, hey, this is ours. Yeah. Nobody can touch this.
No, that's good.
Let's preserve this for the sake of no more cul-de-sacs in this area. I mean, and we can do it without government. That's the thing. That's where the libertarian in me comes up.
Sure.
We can do it without government. We don't need government to do this. All we need is a good idea, because good ideas. Go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, the Sand County Almanac was something. Is that? Am I saying that right? The Sand County Almanac.
Yeah.
Yeah. That Aldo Leopold. It just rang a bell. Blake Marshall on this podcast talked about that being one of the most influential books on his hunting career, and I just wanted to mention that.
That's awesome.
Because that's one of the books I've skimmed through a little bit, but I've not really sat down and read. And I mean, it's one of those. You're 100. God, I just love having you as a guest, because this is the same stuff that I talk about here all the time. But my listeners are probably tired of hearing me say it. But it's. I mean, you're preaching to the choir here, man. This is great.
Well, hunters find themselves in a very strange place, because on one hand, 99% of statistics are made up right on the spot, but I would say a large percentage of deer hunters are Republicans. Yeah. And Republicans are tied to conservatism. Okay, but 90% of conservatives are not conservation minded. And here I am in the middle between Democrat, Republican. I'm just like freedom, free markets, and this weird little piece of myself that I can't let go of. That's like, hey, what are you guys doing? We need to like take a step back, and we need to preserve some of this stuff because it's beautiful. It is nothing that we can reconstruct. The human hand cannot make a swampland or a marshland. The human hand cannot create the ideal whitetail habitat. We're inadequate. We're inadequate, and I just, the Republicans call people like me tree huggers. Democrats call people like me bloodthirsty knuckle draggers.
Murderers, yeah. Right.
But I feel like I'm just here in the middle saying, no, I'm neither of these things, but I want both of you to listen to me. Like, there's common ground between us. Like, we shouldn't be polluting the oceans. We shouldn't be like devastating our national forests. Not national forests, but our forests. We have to, if we're going to preserve wildlife so that our children and our children's children can appreciate it, then we have to put some value in it. And the only value that I've ever seen with any merit is through hunting and fishing. Yeah,
no, that's good. And I mean, the thing that are people that are on the other side of the fence, literally, that believe in, that we're bloodthirsty and that we're knuckle draggers and everything else like that, because I use that same terminology. They don't realize the sorrow that we feel when we stick a knife in a fish, or when we put a bullet or an arrow in a deer. That we're, in a way, it looks to them like we're destroying nature. And I'm trying to teach my son the difference between that right now. Where we consume nature, it becomes part of us, and then it gives us energy. And but it's that visceral bit of sorrow that you feel when you take that fish home, or you shoot that deer, shoot that hog, or whatever. It's something that I don't think a lot of people on the other side of the platform think about. That we feel that too. We care about that animal too. We care about our own animals too. We care about nature and the further, use of that, resource in the future. So I'm agreeing with your point, in other words.
Exactly. And what we have to realize as hunters, we need to be cautious of how we phrase things, but at the same time, we need to be very aware that we live on a planet in which 98% of the people 98% of the people are omnivores. Mm-hmm. That means they eat meat and they eat plants. And I mean, we are not the minority, but hunters have been backed into a corner to where we feel like we are the minority. We need to rephrase. We need to reevaluate how we phrase things, and we need to give our way of living a better. Well, we need to convey it better so that we can reach a larger audience. And that defies everything in my libertarian spirit. But if there's one thing for me to backslide on, it's that. Because I feel I don't want to see subdivisions stretching across countries. I don't want to see our oceans depleted of fish. I want to be able to take my daughter down to the ocean and catch some cell cats and a couple sharks. I want to be able to take my daughter out and take her into actual wilderness and to let her shoot an elk. I mean, sure. This country, this world really, and that's what the Falling of the Veil was about. It's because I felt, and probably more pessimistic then than I do now, I felt that was too far gone.
Yeah.
But I mean, it is people like Joe Rogan and Cameron Hanes. Even though I mean, I'm not the biggest Cameron Hanes fan, I will say this: he has brought a lot of people into hunting, and so is Joe Rogan. It's people on the fringe. It's people that you wouldn't expect to get into the hobby. Those are the people that we need to try to reach, because those people are the people that are going to shift the overall consciousness of our species.
Yeah. No, I agree.
And that's what we need. We need our consciousness shaken up. We need to be woken up. Because there are a lot of people that have no idea where their food comes from. They have no idea what they're putting into their bodies.
Right.
And hunting's just, I mean, I imagine you're like me, you grew up hunting. It's just something that is so obvious that you don't think to talk about it.
Yeah.
But it needs to be talked about to everybody you meet. You're like, hey, have you ever been deer hunting?
Yeah.
Well, tell me about your diet.
Yeah.
You know that has this in it. You know that has that in it. You know how they're raised, right? You know your pork chops probably never saw daylight.
Mm-hmm.
Well, what if I could offer you an opportunity to go out into the wilderness to harvest your own meat, and it will die a quick death, much harmless than what nature would provide it, being eaten alive by coyotes, or I can't even fathom what it is to freeze to death,
or starve to death. For that.
Starve to death. Yeah. And then you can provide food for your own family, and you know that it doesn't have any antibiotics or any. People will listen. The vast majority, 98% omnivore. The vast majority of people will at least lend an ear to it. And sure, they might not accept you, but just keep hammering. Like Cameron Hanes says, just keep hammering, just keep pushing them. Well, I mean, every time you see like a weakness, just be like, well, you know that that's kind of hypocritical. Like,
right. No,
you're a vegan, but you have leather loafers on. I mean, just little things. just keep hammering. You have to. And every situation's different. Sometimes you got to handle people with children's gloves, and you have to like kind of lure them into the idea, and some people you can just be upfront with. You can be blunt with, be like, you're full of it.
Right, and to your point, Zach, the one thing I see that Joe Rogan and Cameron Haynes and Steve Rinella and guys like that are doing also, and not those guys exactly, but the whole movement of this fit hunter. I eat organic, I eat lean protein, that kind of stuff. I'm starting to get more into that because I've started hitting the gym a lot lately and getting healthier and losing weight, and I'm really starting to live that lifestyle of, hey, I know where my meat comes from. And I would sometimes, back in the day, back when I worked, before I came to work for the magazine, I went to go work, I worked in the school fundraising thing, and all kinds of different teachers and stuff in school fundraising at different schools. And one of them was a vegan, and I basically told her, I eat natural meat for the same reason you don't eat meat at all. I don't agree with the way that those animals are treated. I don't agree with the way that, the slaughterhouses and all that other stuff goes on. And I mean, we found common ground together right away. You know what I'm saying?
Well,
just with that kind of mindset.
I don't find that surprising at all because that's something else that needs to be addressed is the vegans. Like hunters put their crosshairs right on the vegan's heart, which is such an easy target because their hearts are so big.
Yeah. Their
hearts are so big. The only reason they're vegans is because they have huge hearts.
That's a good point.
We should love the vegans because they are what it is to be human. They like tenfold. Like they're trying their best to not be immoral. Even though sometimes they spout idiocracy and they don't make valid points, they're coming from an emotional place, and I think that like deer hunters need to find a way to approach that big old heart and to be like, listen, you're unhealthy, little buddy.
Yeah. Yeah, or I did.
Come on
with that
over
one.
here.
Right, come on over here.
I got some nutrients for you, and I'm just joking here, but for real though, like vegans, they really do possess like what it is to be human, which is like we're self-aware. We are 100. We're the only species known to us to understand like the pain that we like release upon other living creatures, and they want to reduce that, but they have lost their anchor. They've lost their anchor that ties them to what it is to be human from a primal sense. And that's the bridge that we have to rebuild.
And there's nothing wrong with us rebuilding it too. I mean, there's
not
plenty that we can do as hunters to reach across the aisle and be, I don't want to say bipartisan to not get into politics, but you know what I'm saying, to understand where they're coming from, and seek first to understand, then to be understood is what I'm trying to say.
Exactly.
So that's one of the
well worded
7 habits of highly effective people I stole there. So anyway, but no, that's great. And so, do you have anything? I mean, are you mainly a bow hunter then?
You would think so. No, I'm not.
Okay, because I see you with a lot of bows in your videos and stuff. I was just curious what your main weapon of choice was.
I love archery. This past deer season, as a matter of fact, it was the opening day of muzzleloader season here in Georgia. We have 1 week of muzzleloader season, and everybody in my little 5 square mile community was hunting this one buck. Everybody had pictures of him. I'd been seeing him from the road at work. I started to call in sick. I mean, I literally saw him like 500 yards from my deer stand. And then opening day of muzzleloader season, I had a bow in my hand. And he came out at 60 yards. It was like cracking daylight, mist out. Doe came right in, and he held up right at 60 yards. And I just watched him, and it was one of the most memorable, one of the most beautiful mornings that I've ever experienced. And then after the mist lifted, I watched him chase does 80 yards out of range for probably 15 minutes. And that was a trophy in and of itself.
That's
I'm
Yeah.
I mean, it just don't happen that much. But if I had a muzzle loader at home, you know, I had a muzzle loader at home, but I didn't take it. But when rifle season rolled around, I didn't hunt on my bow anymore, because I was kind of kicking myself for that. But I don't know. I grew up gun hunting, and I think old Donnie Vincent just made a big post about, because he was archery only for a long time, and he experienced a pretty profound gun hunt, and he made a big post on Instagram about it, and I thought that was very admirable, because that's something else that I think that shuns potential hunters away from the activity. I don't like calling it a sport, because I don't think it's a sport. I think it's life. I don't want to call it a way of life. I want to call it life. I think that's what we're supposed to be doing. I think that's what we're meant to do. And he was just talking about how he was a bow only guy for so long, and how he went out on this rifle hunt, and how it has reshaped his like philosophy on hunting. And there's just something about squeezing a trigger and feeling a bang, and it just feels right. And I've never, I mean, some people have felt that I don't even know what the word is, that desire to put the gun down. I've never felt that. Like when rifle season comes around, I'm like, let's great. Go. I don't have to bring a rangefinder.
Right.
I don't have to bring binoculars. I don't have to bring any of this stuff. I can just kind of just scoot on up the tree. I mean, Jesus, a safety vest is enough. I mean, come on.
Yeah, I know what you mean.
But everything I'm saying tonight, I've thought about a million times. I think about this stuff all the time, especially during this time of year when most states in America are coming into their archery seasons. Well, I might be ignorant.
No, you're right. I mean, sure. some come into September, some come in October. Just about every state comes in sometime around now. Yeah, for the most part.
Okay, as far as Georgia goes, we've been in for almost a week now.
Wow.
So if I misspoke, I'm sorry.
No, you're fine.
But I'm just I'm just like, I'm not gonna smack talk rifle hunters.
No.
Because what good is that gonna do for not me, not you, but for deer hunting?
Right.
What good is that gonna do? It's not gonna do any good. It will probably turn people off. Because archery, you hunt with a bow.
Yeah, I do. Of course. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Well,
I'm more of a crossbow guy than myself. That's why I was bringing that up.
That's fine.
Yeah,
that's fine.
I am a bow guy, but I was just bringing that up because Dustin Ellerman, one of our shooting editors that I've had on the podcast a few times, he was seeing he got to shoot a crossbow, an Excalibur Assassin crossbow at 100 yards at Range Day this year at SHOT Show Range Day. I was with him, and he said it's so cool watching that arrow arc and drop right into the target. And I said, that's a mystical flight of the arrow. All the archers that are really philosophical will talk about that. Ted Nugent's one of them, to bring his name up again. But, just watching that mystical flight as it goes in and drops right into place. I mean, there's nothing more beautiful next to just nature itself.
I got a video about the Zen state.
Cool.
I have a video. I'm going to send it to you. If you like The Falling of the Veil,
I love it.
And you're talking about the mystical flight of the arrow. Well, I wrote an entire piece. It's only like 4 minutes long, but it's called the Cicada Song because here in Georgia, I don't know where are you at?
I'm in Texas and we have cicadas quite a bit. Yeah.
Okay. Well, you know that cicada song.
I do.
Yeah. Well, I named it that because that's all you hear when you're practicing bows in the evening.
Yeah, it's a good
That's all you hear. That's all you hear. That's all you hear. Yeah. And it's the entire piece is just about that.
Wow.
That song ringing in your ears the entire time, and the state you have to get in as you walk back and forth down the line, retrieving arrows, going back, taking your deep breath, and then eventually you can drown that song out. And that's when the arrow flies true. I'll send that video to you.
Yeah,
maybe one day in the future you'll share it with some of your listeners. But to me personally, I think that it's probably the best piece that I've written as far as outdoor riding goes, as far as deer hunting riding goes. The Falling of the Veil is it's a little long for most people. So.
No, and we're playing all of it on this show. I mean, the thing is, it just so profoundly spoke to me about the visceral act of hunting, just the fact that the wild is dying in the world, and we've got to do something about it. I mean, just everything that you hit on just connected with me spiritually in such a profound way. I can't explain what that meant to me. So it's just like you and I were talking we were talking on the same wavelength is what I'm trying to say. Sorry to interrupt. Yeah.
No, you're fine. I interrupted you, but and it's not just the wild dying in the world, but the wild's dying in us as a species.
That's where I'm going with that too. Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah.
And I figured you were, and I think that's what we as hunters have a duty to fulfill. That's where we have a duty to fulfill is resurrecting that primal. And I don't mean this in a derogatory sense, but we need to resurrect that primal bloodlust in our species. Not to where we go out and we just kill without empathy, but to kill with or to kill with apathy, but to kill with empathy.
Yeah.
Is what I meant to say. I'm sorry.
I know what you mean. That's cool.
But I appreciate you reaching out to me, man. I hope that this interview doesn't ruffle too many feathers.
No, I think this is good, man. I think overall, I mean, you've got really great mindset and just the way that I know my listeners fairly well, and most of them will agree with most of what you're saying as far as reaching across the aisle to other people, especially vegans and anti-hunters, and then just it's the stuff that I talk about on the show all the time. I mean, that spiritual connection with God or Jesus or Buddha or whatever you believe, it's just
or just the universe in general.
The universe in general, right? I mean, the universal source, creator, whatever you want to call it. But it's such a communion for me, and it's one of the things I look forward to the most when I'm out in the woods by myself. Is that I just get to let go and just let all my stress and all my frustrations and fears and failures out, and kind of surrender them to the nature. I mean, that's kind of what it is for me. So you've been a great guest. How do people find out more about you? And you've got a website and a YouTube channel. I want to definitely make sure we plug in the show notes.
I ain't worried about that, man. All I want is I want deer hunters to be more conscious of how they portray themselves, and I want them to consider their ego. And for the past 5 years, I have been spouting that the woods are my cathedral, they're my altar.
Yeah.
That's where I go to cleanse myself, and you may have some listeners that feel like that's some hippy dippy bull. But
I don't see it that way at all, man.
It's true, man. That's where I go for cleansing, and if we can just hang on to that notion that this is something that we're supposed to be doing. I don't care about my YouTube channel. I don't care about it growing. I'm making videos because I like making them.
Sure.
I'm not going to plug anything. I just want people to know that I'm just some dude out here writing things that feels right. And I hope they kind of listen and not think that I have any kind of agenda, because all I'm wanting to do is to see us survive as a species, and to see us be able to continue to go out into the wild and to bring nutrients to our families.
No, that's great.
Whether you're a man or a woman, it doesn't matter. You go out you will be able to go out into the wild and to bring nutrients to your family. That's the only thing I want to deliver to your audience.
No, that's fantastic. Thank you so much for joining us, Zach. I really appreciate it.
Thanks, man. You have a good night.
And there he goes, ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Zach Byrd. Happy to have him on the podcast. Nothing that he was trying to say was all about him. It was all about the the guttural soul nature that we have of the wild inside of us and the wild that's dying outside of us, in nature and civilization taking over. And I really enjoyed this interview. I think it's one of my better interviews, and I hope you guys enjoyed it too. And again, this is not so much tactical and practical this week. I just wanted to talk about some of the the introspective things of why we hunt and fish, and just get deep with you for a moment, because that's kind of where my heart and soul is, and some of this stuff is introspective like Zach is. So anyway, I hope you enjoyed it. All right, if you've not done so already, please subscribe to our newsletter, Tactical and Practical Tuesday, Wildlife Wednesday, and the Texas State of the Outdoor Nation Thursday. Those are free. They're new content that our editor-in-chief, who I've had on the show many times, Chester Moore, puts together, and just really great content pieces that are kind of a foretaste of the feast to come of the monthly magazine. Even if you live outside of Texas, there's a lot of stuff. We call it the national news of Texas, and it's for Texas and beyond. We try to make that big. We had a contest a while back, and we had somebody win from Oklahoma and 2 people win from Michigan. So it's not just in the Texas Outdoor Nation itself that is only Texas. It is obviously Texas and beyond, and this podcast certainly is for everybody, outside of Texas. And I appreciate you guys that listen outside of the state for sure. So I know most of our listeners are in here from what I can tell by the demographics, but it is really, really cool to have everybody, chiming in from other places. So if you've not done so, please contact me on social media. It is I'm very readily available to contact and message. My Facebook profile is public. I don't have a page for the podcast because pages aren't that big of a deal on Facebook anymore as they used to be, as far as engagement goes. But I do have my own personal Facebook profile. My last name is spelled WARNCKE, middle name VAUGHN. Dustin is my first name, and you look me up, tell me you like the show, tell me you don't like the show, whatever you want to tell me. Just connect with me on social media so we can talk. I also put out some motivational videos on my personal Facebook account that basically just talk about living and faith and love and all the great things that I talk about on a personal level with people. And then we have the Texas Fish and Game Facebook page as well, which we've got tons of content on, over 60,000 followers or so. And just really, really good stuff. So I've got a really good new program coming up in the October, mid-October timeframe that we're going to do, called the Tex African Safari, which is going to be sponsored by Norma Ammunition, and more on that later in the year. But that's going to be one of our fall special digital programs that we're doing around hunting in Texas and beyond for big game. So I think you're really going to enjoy that as well. So anyway, if you've not done so already, please subscribe to the podcast. It is free. It does not cost you a dime. These come out every 2 weeks just because it takes a lot of time to put these things together, and I really appreciate the time that you guys take to visit our sponsors and check out our stuff and everything like that. That means a lot to me. But every 2 weeks on a Thursday or on a Wednesday is our little Easter egg over at fishgame.com. Our shows typically release a Wednesday before the Thursday they release every 2 weeks. Bi-weekly, so you can check that out. And thank you guys so much for watching, reading, and listening. Have an awesome day in the outdoors. We'll see you next time.
Every summer around July, the air here in Georgia becomes a blanket of steam, weaved with swarming mosquitoes, equipped with ticks that drop from the above leaves like articulate dirty bombs. The distant laughs and cries of neighborhood children seem to hold the brevity of spring, which, too, was pushed by the indifferent sun to a mysterious, cooler place. As dusk arrives, brown bats and their erratic maneuvering and silent songs seem to lure the children back into the yards. We, good parents, follow and watch on in suspended fascination and intrinsic nostalgia, remembering a time when the world could be contained within a small acre of land, when even the summer couldn't protect the fireflies from our primal urge to chase. It's always in failing light, beneath a symphony of cicadas, before the silhouettes of my children dancing the sacred summer dance, that I begin to feel it. And although I cannot yet act upon it, I wrap it up in all the beauty of the dusk, to savor the cool, bloody call of fall.